Welcome to the dOrg Hot Seat. This episode is one of the ones that has generated the most buzz within the dOrg Hot Seat. I think it is both because of how articulate were Nathan and Zuz, and also because Snapshot is something that is extremely simple and popular, but packs a great deal of flexibility. For us at dOrg, it was extremely exciting to be able to ask them about the architecture decisions of one of the most used infrastructure for DAOs, and to see how they are planning to overcome their main criticism, not being on-chain. Spoiler alert, Snapshot X will be on-chain, which comes with a whole set of challenges because Snapshot is very, very flexible precisely because it is not on-chain. So the dOrg members spent some time trying to understand how this will work. If you want to know how things in crypto work, make sure you follow and subscribe to these podcasts, and the dOrg members will grill the guests for you. Or maybe you will be able to do it very soon too. Thanks Nathan and Zuz for bringing all of this wealth of information about Snapshot to the hot seat.
Snapshot is a governance platform. Basically, if you want to understand a little bit more about how it came about, it's pretty simple. In August 2020, Balancer was kind of finding a solution for tokens in liquidity pools to be able to vote because, the promise of crypto is you have the power, you can vote with your token, you can decide where your organization goes, but at the same time, if that's mutually exclusive with using your tokens and participating in DeFi, that just doesn't work. So an engineer over there called Fabian, who's now my boss, decided, all right, I'm going to do this solution. And the way it's going to work is we're going to be kind of hybrid off-chain, on-chain. And we're going to leverage this new thing called IPFS. So IPFS is a decentralized storage system. So basically when people vote on Snapshot, their vote goes to IPFS. And from there, we pick up all of these votes and we say, well, this is the result. We do all the computation based on the tokens that you have in your wallet. And we enable a lot of pretty complex strategies, I would say. In this presentation, I'm going to take a few more minutes to talk about what's possible on Snapshot. Since I'm talking to developers, I think I'm going to go a little bit more in depth into what I find cool, what I find really composable and dynamic about Snapshot. And then I'll take a few minutes to talk about what we see as good options for the future and where we think that the governance space needs to go. And then I'm happy to be challenged violently, as was promised. So the way that Snapshot works at the moment, and what I think is really good about it, is the fact that the community has built a lot of strategies around Snapshot. So if you go here, you can look at all the different strategies that exist. And a lot of these go as far as calling a certain contract and asking for information about, saying that a certain NFT is worth that much, but another NFT in the collection is worth that much, or saying that people that have interacted with the contract 5 times, well, they get 5 voting power or something with that. And what I find really exciting as well is you can combine strategies together. So I think the communities that really take advantage of this are either cross-chain communities that have a strategy that says, well, we're going to look at this target token in Avalanche and in Optimism and in BSC or something like that. And all of these are going to be worth voting power, which kind of solves cross-chain governance, which obviously is becoming a more pressing issue. But I also love people that use it in, I would say, more funky ways. My favorite example and a team that has done not only a tremendous job using everything that Snapshot has, but also integrating into their own front end everything about Snapshot, is Decentraland. So Decentraland users, they vote with, I think, 7 types of voting power. And if we go on Snapshot and we start looking at the different voting strategies that Decentraland uses, you can see they use their own token, their NFT, the size of the estate of people in Decentraland, this multi-chain strategy that allows them to do this on all the chains that Decentraland supports. Different NFTs, but this time that are worth more than the previous ones. A delegation strategy that allows them to use off-chain delegation, which is something we developed with Gnosis, which is sort of an off-chain register of delegation that allows for free delegation. The wearable rarity, I have to say that I have no idea what this is, but I still find it quite cool. And even something called Decentraland rental lessors. Again, something that I'm not particularly familiar with, but I just find that super exciting because this really showcases the flexibility of using a tool that's hybrid. And I think that's what I want to maybe highlight for this public of developer is I think there's a strong sense of on-chain, everything is better. But the truth is, crypto is incredibly expensive. And nobody is onboarding billions of users to Ethereum. Probably not even nobody is onboarding billions of users to Optimism or Arbitrum. We think that ZK rollups probably have the best chance, but still, like it's a long way to go. So having this off-chain crutch, because it is a crutch, it has to be called that, is extremely useful for pushing your application to touch many more people. And I'm not one to say, oh, Snapshot is awesome, and we have this number or that number that I want you to listen to. But I will say that amongst everything in DAO tooling, Snapshot is by far the most used tool. And it's interesting because now all of that data is available on Dune. All of this data is available on several different platforms that you can query, Flipside, even Nansen. And what's really cool is you'll see we have some of the best numbers in terms of monthly active users in crypto. That is including OpenSea, Uniswap, all of that, because they're not paying anything. With a signature, everything is working, everything is very easy to pick up. And I think that this is very strong. However, and this is the second part of this really small introductory talk, we're working right now on on-chain voting. Because there is reasons for wanting everything on-chain. There's a level of security there that is just very appealing. However, it should be, battle-tested contracts. It should be something really, really safe. Because if you're looking at something like Beanstalk, that was I think for me, a very exciting project. I thought they had a very interesting new take on DeFi. A governance exploit destroyed the protocol. They made their own governance contracts, and very quickly, attackers managed to take advantage of it and empty the treasury. And that we really want to make sure that it doesn't happen. And I think one good way of doing that is having governance be this part of your protocol that you're not building yourself, but you're rather leveraging stuff that has been built by other people and that has been reused across the ecosystem to a level where you're pretty sure that there's nothing wrong with it. So the next part of Snapshot's evolution is something called Snapshot X. And Snapshot X is Snapshot on-chain. Everything on-chain, not on Compound Governor, not on Bravo, not on Alpha, our own smart contracts of governance that are going to be audited by some of the best auditing firms in the space, and that we hope are going to enable some communities to use Snapshot in both ways. Some decisions are really cool being off-chain, and that flexibility that Snapshot proposes is just something you're never going to get anywhere else on-chain, I think, for probably the next 3-4 years at least. But I would say it will never really reach that level of flexibility that we can just have with having a JSON file being a strategy. However, you're going to get the increased security that the multi-million-dollar decisions that DAOs take, nowadays it happens every day, get that highest level and highest standard of security. So yeah, I think that's my presentation. I hope this covered a lot of what we're doing, a lot of the future, and yeah, ready for questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So now that you still have Decentraland on the screen, can you take all of these strategies and use them together in the same vote?
That's how it works. You can vote with everything at the same time, and that level of flexibility is only going to be possible if you have that off-chain component. If we were to try to calculate all that on-chain, I can begin to tell you that the cost of computation for this sort of complex things, and this would be even if you managed in the first place to locate all of these elements that are all in small contracts on many different chains.
You would still need oracles and
exactly.
Still need an off-chain part, yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's really that's the vision. The vision is that this kind of complexity is going to be really hard to replicate on-chain, We're going to try, though. We're really going to try, and we're going to try to lower the costs. And that's why most of the architecture of Snapshot X is on layer 2s. And I think that's where Snapshot X is going to be extremely useful for a lot of DAOs. But for DAOs on layer 1 that just don't have that many funds, I think Snapshot is going to be a great possibility. And what we're really working on with Snapshot X as well is using storage proofs to prove a certain state of L1 on an L2, so that all the voting, all the computation can happen on layer 2 based on tokens and things on chain on layer 1, which that's another really exciting part, I think, of the architecture of Snapshot. And I'm going to send, actually, obviously, I'm biased. I'm really excited about Snapshot X, but I'm going to send the docs here because I think this is going to be able to enable a lot of applications built on top of it.
Excellent. We got a lot of questions already. We got like a very exciting stuff. So Nick, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Sure. Yeah, you kind of touched on it a little bit, Nathan, which I appreciate. But I was just curious, just as far as how you can ensure that off-chain signing techniques used by Snapshot are secure and it can't be manipulated to skew the results of the surveys, especially, of course, in a decentralized environment where trust is a major concern.
That is an excellent question. That's obviously, that's the trade-off. If you want the best security, you need an on-chain transaction to say, well, these tokens are voting in that direction. However, the way that Snapshot works right now, we're quite happy with already in terms of security. So as I said, it relies a lot on IPFS. So every time a vote is made, it's pinned on IPFS through 4 different services, through something that we built ourselves that we call Pineapple. And basically Pineapple uses Foreverland, Fleek, and Piñata, and a 4th one, can't remember. And anyway, it uses these 4 different services to pin the same content on IPFS to make sure that we keep it, that we have it. And users can verify at all time that their vote has been taken into account if they were to kind of backtrack it, if they were to look for it on IPFS. The part that is harder to, let's say, decentralize is the actual computation. It is saying, well, I know that Nick voted. However, we used, an archive node to make sure to figure out how many tokens Nick had on Ethereum, and we used an Avalanche archive node to know if he had the necessary NFT on Avalanche to make sure that he could participate. And that part is very hard to completely decentralize, to remove trust entirely. If you're looking for these kinds of kind of out there information on chain, that's hard to have the same amount of security.
Maybe I can add one thing here
Sure.
in terms of security and like the censorship of the data. Because what happens is that whenever a user is taking an action on Snapshot, they are signing a message, which is then verified by one of our services called Sequencer. And what Sequencer does is basically that it holds its own private key to generate an Ethereum signature that is then stored kind of like a proof of that action being verified on IPFS. So thanks to that private key, same as like with your wallet, you're the one triggering the transactions and taking control of your funds. Same way, no one else can actually put the fake signatures or change the signatures that have been verified through our services. The code is all open source, so you can have a look at that. And also, the cool thing is that you can actually replay the entire history of Snapshot from the very beginning, thanks to the fact that the signatures are generated from that one service, and also each message has the auto-incremented ID. So basically, then you can play them one by one, every action, every user, every single vote, every single proposal. So that adds like that additional layer of security, and the actual signatures cannot be altered once they have been verified.
Right. So basically, since the stack is open source, anybody can run that stack apart from the infrastructure that you're running and can verify themselves, which nobody does, but they could, and that's often security enough.
Yeah, I think that's one part, and then the second part is eventually we're working on decentralizing that even, making sure that anyone can run a hub, and I think that will be the next step that really enables Snapshot to be.
That was going to be my next question. What is the actual infrastructure stack that you need to run? You mentioned archive nodes. You mentioned the sequencer. How does the infrastructure stack work?
I think that's a perfect question for Zeus.
Yeah, it's a bit complex to explain it right now, but what we can think of it as 3 different layers. First, we have our UI, which is the platform that you can see right now, which is basically a Vue.js application, which is talking then to our backend. So the backend is mainly orchestrated by the sequencer that I just mentioned. And sequencer is responsible for verifying the action and the signature that is coming from the UI, which a user can sign with their wallet. And a couple of things that it's doing is, one thing, it's calculating the voting power of a user if we're talking here about casting a vote. So based on all the strategies that you can see right now and the specific snapshot of the proposal, so basically the moment at which the proposal was created is the moment when we are checking what does that account relate to, basically, in terms of their voting power, in terms of activity on chain, in terms of the badges that they hold, and so on. It's also checking the basically eligibility to vote, because certain spaces can also set certain conditions that allow users to cast a vote or block them from doing so. Once that's calculated, the Ethereum signature is produced and then stored on IPFS. At the same time, we are storing it in a MySQL database, which you can actually see also through the dashboard on Dune that Nathan mentioned. This data is also then exposed through another service, through our API, with GraphQL that any of you can access right now and have a look at the latest messages, the latest votes, spaces, their settings. So everything is auditable, basically. And then sequencer, after the successful voting power calculation, generation of the signature, and storing it on IPFS, it is sending the response back to Snapshot's interface, so that then the data is digested and you can see the result in the UI. I hope that's answering your question, more or less.
Nice. That was an excellent reply. Thank you so much. I've got so Leo has a couple of questions on the on-chain stuff. But before we go on to the on-chain and how will it work, I'd like to ask a very simple question, but it's kind of like nagging. It's at the back of my head. So since strategies are basically arbitrary code that can be executed, what are the protection measures that you put so people don't execute strategies that are actually malicious and are executed in your servers?
This is an excellent question. Zeus, do you want to take it, or?
Yeah, sure. We actually talked about it today with Nathan. So the thing is that the code, everyone can contribute to our infrastructure. Everyone is welcome to create a new voting strategy or a validation strategy. However, it doesn't mean that every voting strategy will be just approved and we will just merge the code into our code base. We are always making sure that there is no buggy code, there is no malicious code. It wouldn't cause any confusion for the users or unexpected results. So it's kind of under control, and we want to make sure that users can vote in a secure and a predictable way.
Great, thank you. So Leo, do you want to go ahead with your question about on-chain voting?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Thanks a lot for the overview. And yeah, I'm very much interested in the on-chain perspective, because eventually, if one does it off-chain, voting off-chain, then there's still this process of bringing that implication of the vote on-chain, which is then the insecure thing. So I'm really appreciating that you put things on-chain. I'm wondering, all this kind of strategies that you do off-chain, which is great. How are you planning to have those strategies on-chain? Like, how would the whole process look like in principle? Like, I would take, a little bit of this token, a little bit of that token, maybe, I don't know, some delegation, who knows? How would that user flow work?
So obviously, first, really cool question. I think obviously the problem is that you can be as complex as your off-chain, right? If you look at Compound Governor right now, you're super limited. You can only vote with tokens, with one token, one vote. And not only does Snapshot has these out there voting strategies, you've also got kind of weird voting systems. You could use weighted voting on Snapshot to choose amongst several options. Approval voting is another thing that we have. Quadratic voting is something we facilitate. All of that is very difficult to do on-chain. What's going to be like the overall architecture, and I think like that's probably one of the most interesting things you can read about in the docs, is you're going to have 3 types of strategies. The first one is authenticator strategies. That just means, you could even imagine something that's maybe a little bit too far, but I'm signing a signature on Solana, and my, everything, the computation, everything that happens behind is on Starknet, in the case of SnapshotX Starknet, but the authentication is happening on Solana. And then you would have a voting strategy that is, SPL tokens on Solana verified through, that's probably the Solana example. It's probably a few more years down the line. But for EVM chains, through a storage proofs, you can verify the amount of, a certain state of the blockchain on another blockchain using this really succinct proof that you're bridging over. So for this, we're using something called Herodotus.dev, which is just a really awesome company that specializes in storage proofs. It's still early stage, obviously, but that's how it's going to work. And what you have next is some amount of strategies that you can use, mostly multi-chain stuff that has to do with NFTs. Delegation is obviously a really big one. All of these, I would say, relatively basic strategies will be available on SnapshotX soon. They're this year, let's say. But there's a whole host of strategies that we're going to have to either let the community work on, because the cool part about SnapshotX is, when you're creating your DAO, you just have a space contract, and then you're adding these strategies one by one in a really modular way. So as the controller of the DAO, and by the way, the DAO itself can be the controller of the DAO. You can say that the only person that can change the space contract is the space contract itself through governance. And you would say, for example, we have this execution strategy that's going to happen on Starknet, or we have this execution strategy that happens on zkSync, and we're adding it. And once it's added, you can propose a transaction, an outcome of your of the voting, and say whether that outcome is going to be completed or not based on other elements that are inherent to the space contract, such as quorum, a voting delay, a certain threshold of users that have to participate, or all of these sort of things. I hope I was clear enough, because it's obviously like a really SnapshotX is a really complex product. So I really recommend reading the docs if you're interested in hearing more. I think the TLDR of my long-winded answer is not everything will be available at launch. We won't be able to have the same amount of flexibility.
Thanks a lot. So very quickly, essentially, if there's an outcome of the vote, say yes, we want to empty the treasury or something, then usually in a DAO, there's some roles. Only certain people can trigger that outcome. So how would that outcome of the on-chain vote, which I suppose will take place on some designated contract, have the ability to trigger that transaction to change the state of the DAO, let's say.
That's awesome as well. I mean, that really touches on one of the most interesting subjects that I think everyone is talking about right now, which is account abstraction. So basically, your space contract is a sort of smart contract wallet, if you think about it. And since it's a sort of smart contract wallet, you can set limits to it. You could say, you can bake into the space contract, you can only send 10% of the funds at a time, or you can only send funds to whitelisted addresses, or there is a delay between the outcome of the vote and the moment where it's executed, where there can be like a special procedure.
Cool, thanks.
My pleasure.
So from what I'm understanding, apart from this last answer that you gave, but thank you for the presentation, by the way, it was great. So do you want the contract that you're developing to serve as the treasury? That's the first question.
That's it's obviously, when you think about it, any multi-sig is governance. It's a very simple form of governance. It's saying, well, out of these 7 people, if 4 people agree, the money goes through and the transaction is done. So what we want to enable is to complexify that process and say, well, on our side, you can dream bigger. You can say it's not about 4 people out of 7, it's about 51% of the token in the DAOs, or it's about a minimum of 1,000 people amongst the community of 1 token, 1 vote, style DAO. If at least 51% of the people say go, then it's go. I think it can be much, much larger than a multi-sig. However, we don't want to build a multi-sig ourselves. I think it's a bit we'd have too much hubris going for building a multi-sig ourselves and say, oh, we're just going to make a way more complex multi-sigs with way more moving parts. Like it sounds like a terrible plan, and when we won't do that. So what we'll do is rely on other multi-sig solutions and simply say, well, the space contract is the signer, or is the sole, the sole guardian, let's say, of this treasury or of this multi-sig. So I think that's how we think about it. I don't think for the foreseeable future that we'll encourage people to manage the treasury entirely using only Snapshot. The crypto ecosystem is vast. DAO tooling is very vast. There's a lot of people that have built incredible products, and we think that DAOs should leverage these different products. Even when you think about it from an abstract perspective, having one app being everything about your DAO is too centralized itself. Even if the app, like us, we're trying to build completely open source, completely openly, with as much feedback from the community as we can. But still, I think the DAO tooling ecosystem should have many different apps coexisting, just to allow this continuing, just not having a single point of failure.
Thank you so much. So basically, you're saying that you want to have what you natively the functionality of Zodiac, right?
So I think what's going to happen rather is that this is going to integrate with the Zodiac. We'll use Zodiac for different things. In a sense, Snapshot X will leverage the Zodiac modules for a lot of things that are happening around it.
Okay, and one more quick question, if you can. So you mentioned that the voting will be one of the functionalities of the contract, and multiple strategies, unlike the governor standard. So you'll have one member, one vote, token weighted, approval, quadratic, and then you will have some sort of endpoint in the contract to interact with the treasury. What are the other functionalities do you want to have in the contract, if anything?
So the Snapshot X contracts, I would careful though, because quadratic, approval voting, all of that's on normal Snapshot. It won't be on Snapshot X, at least at release, right? That's That's really complex to do in Solidity. The Snapshot X contract is for voting. That's the, it's not an all-in-one solution for DAOs. It's really just for voting. It's really about decision making. And where we want to see like flexibility and variability is the different strategies, whether they're authentication strategies, voting strategies that look at your voting power, or execution strategies, what the contract is able to execute on different chains, because that's a big part of it is also that cross-chain element. That's what we want. That's where we want like a lot of richness and a lot of different options. We don't want the Snapshot X contract to be used for example, doing bounties or doing compensations, things like that, right? That's, I think, best handled through apps on top of Gnosis Safe or something like that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
But this is actually Clara's question. I'm just trying to think of a good way to put it. So Snapshot as a governance protocol uses mostly Ethereum addresses or blockchain addresses, which we know they are not great for privacy. They're very easily correlated. They can be demasked quite easy. And have you thought about anonymity or privacy when it comes to voting and Snapshot, and how are you tackling this in Snapshot?
So when you think about privacy, it's obviously complicated because we're on public blockchains. There's limited things you can do. So the first thing we try to enable is to fix what we think is a pretty big problem, which is everyone can see the progress of a vote and be influenced by that progress. And you have strategic voting that can happen. Voting really early with a lot of tokens to push people in a certain direction, for example, or voting really late, kind of by surprise with just enough tokens to sway the vote in your favor. So something we developed with Shutter Network, which runs private nodes. Basically, it's the main goal of Shutter is to combat malicious MEV, but we realized that through their services, we could also do what we call shielded voting. So if you type in shielded voting, you'll see more about our announcement. Basically, shielded voting allows you to hide your vote until the resolution of the vote. So I'll just see that Lansky voted, but I won't see what you voted for until the end of the vote, where everyone's choices are revealed. So I think this is really useful because it still allows you to have this kind of control and social control over who votes what. You don't want the big VCs to be completely anonymous on what they vote so early on in the life of our ecosystem, for example. But at the same time, you do want that privacy that enables people to not have any a priori's before they start voting. So shielded voting already exists, but it's not private voting because you still get to know who voted and who voted for what after the vote ended. For fully anonymous voting, we have a lot of ideas. There's a lot of avenues you can go, and I think there's a lot of engineers here. As you all know, it's all about trade-offs. Do you want purely anonymous voting with a completely controllable and verifiable blockchain? That's always going to be extremely complex. The way we think about it right now is if you're on layer 2 and zero knowledge proofs are used to prove the validity of your transaction from layer 2 to layer 1, what you can imagine is some sort of fractal scaling where you could have a layer 3 that proves something to the layer 2, and then the layer 2 proves all of that to layer 1. So the state of your layer 3 is cryptographically proven to be correct to the layer 2, and then layer 2 settles on layer 1. And once you do that, you could have a fully private layer 3. So this is out there, right? Like I'm not telling you that this is going to come out in the next 2 years, but I think that this is one of our best shots at doing cryptographically proven but completely base level private transactions and votes. So that's where we'll be starting to move some of our R&D efforts in next year. It's about understanding what's necessary to have that private, base private layer 3 that's completely safe and that we can use for voting.
Excellent. That was a great reply. Just for reference, we've had two projects here. We've had Vogdoni, which are working on this problem, right? Like private voting. They're using zero knowledge, and they're quite advanced, but obviously sacrificing some of the flexibility of Snapshot. And one of the things that I can come up with is we also had Sismo, which are working on ZK badges that could be used, maybe not on Snapshot X, but could be used currently on a strategy with the regular Snapshot. Those you can use these.
It's the case.
Sorry?
There already today you can vote on Sismo space
Right, exactly.
with Sismo badges. It's very exciting, I have to say. You have this Ethereum power user thing that they try to work on. The only issue with Sismo is that, so when you create a vote, it only looks kind of retroactively, right? It looks who had at this latest block which badge. And what Sismo wants to enable is badge holders to be able to vote on past proposals. So every time someone mints a badge, they'd be able to join a past proposal or something like that. And that's still complicated to do because, again, we're not really used on either, I would say, either Snapshot or even, I would say, the whole Web3 ecosystem to use these non-transferable badges and to build applications around them. But I think that's going to be huge. That's obviously going to be an incredible way of conserving some amount of privacy while being able to prove a lot of things about yourself, on Ethereum itself. So I would say where my L3 thing is like the long-term plan and shielded voting is the short-term plan, stuff like Sismo is definitely like medium-term plan, and I'm really excited about it personally.
Excellent. Yeah, same here. I think it's gonna really enable a lot more safe interactions on chain. Safe not for the multisig, but just safe for the users. And one last question from Simone.
Yeah, it's a question about the business model of Snapshot. So we know that you had a seed funding round back in 2021. Is there any plan about the economic sustainability of Snapshot long term?
It's a great question. I think it's complicated, right? Like something like Snapshot is a public good, and it's really important to the ecosystem. There's so many DAOs that use it. So every time we think about something like this, we always think, how do we make this a win-win-win, right? How is this a win for us, a win for users, and a win for DAOs at the same time? So the first thing, there's a lot that you can imagine that's more complex, especially when you go into on-chain voting. You can do transaction meta relaying, and you could take a fee there. But that kind of goes against, even when you think about Snapshot X, the goal is for DAOs to pay for the gas fees of users voting. We want to keep the Snapshot experience the same. Ideally, Snapshot on chain is going to look and feel the exact same as normal Snapshot, except on chain. So what we've come up with, I'd appreciate some amount of I'm not going to make everyone sign NDAs, but it's still a work in progress, and it's still something we have to refine. But basically, it's something called Boost. And Boost is your Aave. You need a lot of people to vote on your next governance proposal, and you have a lot of token that you'd like to distribute to active governance participants. So what you say is, I'm going to put 100 100 Aave tokens in this smart contract, and they will be distributed to all governance voters on the pro rata of their voting power, with a ceiling to avoid like whales taking most of it, but just basically incentivizing voters to participate in governance and diluting kind of over time the people that don't vote to the profit of people that vote. And why I think this is going to work is that having a large governance is not a nice to have. It's a requirement. if you're in DeFi, if you're running something like Uniswap, and you've only got 20 people voting and 5 of them are VCs, how is it going to look like in court when you're going to say, well, I'm sorry, but we were decentralized. None of what we did was, we never offered a security to anyone. It was a decentralized protocol. Well, the court is going to say, sorry, but nobody's voting on your thing. 5 VCs control half the supply. In no way, shape, or form, Uniswap Labs is not responsible for the action of Uniswap protocol. So having decentralized governance is hugely important. That's what enables DeFi to truly be not only live up to, I think, what we all expect of it, but also be legally safe, I would say. So incentivizing governance is a dangerous terrain because quickly you can fall into bribes and stuff like that are, let's say, unsavory. Though they work well in like purely financial things, right? Like nobody complains about bribes in the Curve ecosystem. That it just kind of makes sense. That's how the protocol is built. But for a lot of smaller DAOs, bribes are really complicated. So I think that something like Boost is really interesting because you're not saying, I want you to vote this way or that way. You're saying, I want you to vote. That's it. Choose whatever you want. I just want people to be incentivized and to be recognized for the work that they put in as well. And I think that once Boost is around, it's going to also enable delegates because all of a sudden you want to be a delegate that thinks things out, attracts people to delegate their voting power to him or her to make sure that you can get some tokens using Boost and be paid for your research, be paid for the work that you put in to decentralized governance. So I think this is really a product that's going to unlock a lot of professionalism in the governance space. And if we take, let's say, 1% of the tokens that Aave distributes to their delegates, I think it's a very reasonable thing that Aave will be happy to pay. So there you could put a fee that only big players pay happily, but small players can keep having smaller DAOs can keep having everything working just perfectly on Snapshot governance without really needing to use a service like this. So that's one avenue of monetization that I think could be will be really interesting for Snapshot.
Thank you very much. I think it's a very interesting topic, the sustainability and the business model of toolings for DAOs. And happy to have heard this answer and to see that Snapshot is researching in this direction.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you. I think we're lucky to have really quickly gotten a lot of PMF. So we're not in a situation where we have to scramble for a solution to make some money. And that's also what being funded allows you. You can take your time on finding a monetization solution that makes sense. So I think a lot of bad things are being said about VCs from time to time, right? But I'm personally extremely happy that we raised this seed round that allowed us to really concentrate on growth, concentrate on usefulness for DAOs, provide value to the industry, and now being in a position where we can think about mutually beneficial monetization models rather than exploitative.
Excellent. Yep, it is clear that Snapshot has gotten all of these markets, all these market-free product market fits by taking the practical approach, by making something that's useful now, as opposite to a lot of other DAO frameworks that were more complex or hard to use and hard to adopt for most DAOs. And I think there's going to be space for all of them. I think a lot of the things that is being built right now in terms of on-chain voting, governance protocols, anonymity, I'm really excited by this whole new wave. But we have to thank Snapshot. The entire ecosystem needs to thank Snapshot for bringing us something that we can use now and that it works. And for that, you've done an excellent job. And you have done also an excellent job, Nathan, Zuz, at coming here at the dOrg hot seat. You've withstand the temperature of the questions excellently, and a big round of applause to you. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having us. It was really a pleasure, and it's not every day we get like neither Zuz or myself get like this caliber of question. Really, really good questions. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Great questions. Thank you so much for all of them, and for your attention as well. Super nice that you had us here.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if I can end on something, it's Snapshot is still like a work in progress, like many different things, and we're still looking at many. You know, our roadmap is basically infinite, is what I'm trying to say, and we know that this community has a lot of great developers, and we're ourselves hiring. So if any of you want to kind of participate in this kind of weird big adventure that we're on, we're super happy. Like, please DM us, myself or Zeus. And there's really several ways that this can go. We're gonna host like we're gonna be part of like the big DAO tooling hackathon in April. You can definitely try to work on some bounties there, or you can tell us about yourself, tell us about your experience in the Web3 space or inexperience. That's completely fine as well. And we'll be super curious of seeing what we can build together. Snapshot is before everything a Web3 native product, and we love to, people that decide to spend their Thursday night asking questions on the dOrg hot seat, I think are exactly the type of people that we want to recruit at Snapshot.
Yeah, we at dOrg have worked with Snapshot a lot, so we'd love to try to see what we can do together. If dOrg can build part of what you're doing, I think that would be an excellent match.
Absolutely.
And with that, I'm going to put a stop on the recording. Thank you so much, guys.